Okay, this evening we're going to be discussing briefly the requirements for the language grammatical analysis. So I have posted in Blackboard here a sample video of Kennedy telling you a story about going to Walmart and getting an MP3 player out of the machine. Actually, I was very impressed that she could do that. And because it was a claw machine and I can't even do that. So I had been gone and she was relaying the story to me, and it was a much better sample before I turned on the video camera as usual. But this is just a brief sample because it's not anywhere near 50 utterances. It's only 7. But as you can see, I can transcribe it here. And when you get into the transcription, of course, Kennedy's language is long and elaborate and complex. So even though it's 7 utterances, there are many more independent clauses and dependent clauses and subordinate clauses and phrases embedded within these utterances. So you can use your um, judgment about how to divide that up. I divided it where it was just one sentence was calculated as utterance. So here's where I transcribed it. And I do not want to, yeah, sure, I'll save it. Okay, and then here is where I actually translated this. So as you can see, using the abbreviations that were listed in that table in chapter 10, the first thing I did was I went through and labeled whether it was an adverb, a noun, a pronoun, independent clause. Do not count fillers like she used like as a filler. Not there, not like a radio. But that it goes into like in a little slot. That like would be a filler, not like as in the preposition. So, and at first I was using the same color ink, but I went back because I did black ink for the form, and then I started using blue ink for the structure. So you'll be able to see that and embed it within everything. So that was the overall brief analysis, but what I was grading and assessing was to make it measurable was the type token ratio for the analysis of semantic skills and the assessment of syntactic skills. Both of these are from a book called Assessment and Speech Language Pathology Handbook. The author is Shipley, so we refer to it often as the Shipley um, Assessment of Speech Language Pathology Handbook. It's just a great resource for you to have in diagnostics, and I felt was the most practical and simplest way to give you a grammatical analysis because it can get much more complex, but this is just an overview of how you can break down sentences. So the reason you do the syntactic form first, the noun, verb, adverb, is because in the type token ratio you can come here and mark the number of words versus the number of different words. So here are the nouns listed, here are the verbs, the dots indicate that it was used more than once. So MP3 player was used several times because in her sentence, I went to Walmart and I got an MP3 player. There was a ball on the bottom when I got the MP3 player, so I was quick, and that's why I got the MP3 player. It could be just a different MP3 player, like a radio. So you can see she kept on, instead of using the pronoun, referring to the MP3 player over and over again. So when you see 17 out of 21, 17 different words out of 21 number of words said. And it has some classifications. Now, here where it says articles, of course, the book got into more details about determiners. And so some of those pronouns might fit into determiners more than they are pronouns in their usage, but we're just talking about form, how they would be labeled or classified, just like conjunctions are conjunctions, and sometimes they're conjunctive adverbs, and sometimes they're predicates. They're part of the verb predicate, rather. So in WH words, they can be pronouns, but they can also be question words. So it's up to your discretion as the clinician about how you classify that, but know why you're classifying that. So, for instance, all the WH words, even though she didn't make a question, I went ahead and put WHs in that category because they were used as prepositions and as relative pronouns and as conjunctions in their other uses. So, and the reason there are the zeros there because that was the default setting on the Adobe. I think if you actually go in and type the numbers in Adobe, it'll work. So you calculate the total and get a type token ratio. And the book references, I'll have to look it up if there would be, what's the normal range, but that's definitely within the normal range. So, in addition, the assessment of syntactic skills. So going back up where I was talking about using the blue. Well, Mama, that's your noun phrase because it's I and everything that modifies with the I being the subject predicate, in the subject rather, and then everything that modifies that subject, and then you have your predicate. So you have some things that are objects. You have some things that are went to Walmart and one of these Elsa machines. It's all part of your up here verb phrase. And then you have independent clause, and you have an adjective phrase, and you have a coordinating conjunction and another independent clause. So when you look at this independent clause, translate that down here to utterance one. We had all these forms, and we had a main clause and a compound sentence with an active voice that was a declarative. So you can see we have compound, complex, and compound complex sentences. No just plain simple sentences in this sample because everything had at least one conjunction in it. And I didn't even complete this analysis today, but you get the idea. Independent clause, noun phrase, verb phrase, subordinate clause, independent clause, prepositional phrase, subordinate clause. So you might, for your benefit and for clarity, want to do one that's where it's just the form and one when it's just the function. So doing the phrases on a separate sheet than you're doing the form. But you're going to translate all of that into a type token ratio and the assessment of syntactic skills. In addition, you'll need to calculate a mean length of utterance. So based on 50 utterances, and I'm wanting you to get a 100-word utterance sample, but on at least 50, you would divide the number of words by the number of utterances. Now, the book does discuss that instead of words, you can talk about morphemes, given that there are bound morphemes, so plurals and ing and ed, but since we've really had the emphasis on the syntactic analysis and the sentence structure, I want us to focus on the mean length of utterance for the words. You can do the morphemes if you so choose, but words divided by utterances will be fine. But do note how that changes their MLU when you can take consideration into morphemes, bound morphemes versus the unbound morphemes. I take that back. Do the morphemes. Do the morphemes. That's consideration for bound morphemes. So if you have plurals, ing, past tense, anything that changes the meaning of the word, use that in your MLU calculation. So again, this is from the Shipley Assessment and Speech Language Pathology book. And sorry, that's Disney. There's your type token ratio, assessment of syntactic analysis. And that's it. Oh, I also included this test of narrative language sample because if you wanted to, if you're in the clinical setting or a school setting, sometimes we say that this is a good substitute for an elaborate grammatical analysis because it's testing narrative language and it kind of already has the structures there. So this was just an example, the shipwreck story. You can see where I read the story and answered the questions, and she had a score. So she didn't get a score for the girl's name because she didn't say Samantha. She's got 2 points, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point. I think she got 1 point here because she said she was going to fix it. She didn't have the process to take it to school, and 1 point. So she had a total of 9 points. And then this is a norm-based test, so you can actually get a standardized score for that. Now here is the late for school story, and I wanted to highlight this because you can see you can get a point for each thing that she mentioned. So she never gave him a name, and she never said he was late. Movement would be moving from the bed to the kitchen. She talks about the spilled milk and the shoelaces. So there would be points for each element here that she had. And then in addition to that, you would get 0, 1, or 2 points using and or then, more adverbial phrases or clauses. After he, right when he, as he was, causal relationships between events, grammar, and story structure. And again, that's a norm reference test, and you can see where it takes into the grammatical components and it gives you a standardized measure. So I do like this test a lot. It's proven to be very reliable for helping identify children with language disorders. It's standardized, it's normed, you get percentile ranks, and it has 3 sections to the story. So this is again the test of narrative language, and you'll get into that more in some of your studies, I believe, next semester.